Yep.
Welcome to the Accepted Authority podcast, where we help you solve a common consulting growth challenge. I'm Andy Marmont, and as always, with me is Greg Roworth. G'day, Greg.
Hi, Andy.
So today we are going to talk about and answer the question, what's the problem you solve? And the reason why we're covering this today is because that particularly in consulting and the sort of B2B space generally, we see a lot that companies, when they talk about what they do to people and also digitally, a lot of it is around the service or the product. And I feel like, and we both feel like there needs to be some real education and some awakening around how we frame the problem that we solve. Because as we've said a few times on this podcast, customers don't buy you as an HR consultant. They buy the solution, the problem that you're solving. That's what they really want. They don't care about if you call yourself a coach or a consultant. They want to know, how do you transform and how do you take me from a bad space to a good space? So today we're just going to work through our processes and getting some understanding around, well, how do you understand really what the problem you solve is? Because if you can really understand this, then your marketing, your ability to attract premium quality clients, everything all flows from here. So let's get straight into it, Greg. So first of all, we've covered that context. There's an issue at the moment, isn't it, that the companies, consulting firms, they just talk about the widgets and the products.
That's right.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely that's what we see on most consulting firm websites. Is who we are, what do we do? It's all about the services that are provided. But in conversations with some clients that are just starting on my program during the week, the whole conversation about what they're trying to sell, and we're trying to help them attract more premium level clients by being seen as the authority in their market. So when it comes to that perspective, it's not about the services they offer, as you've rightly said. Clients don't want our services. They want the outcomes that those services produce. They want to have that feeling, the satisfaction, the emotions that come from being in a good place with their problem solved. So it comes down to, what is that problem that we're solving? And
yes,
what I find is that because typically we're trained to provide a particular service, as you mentioned before, we're an HR consultant that has HR processes. We have, compliance systems. We have, management processes and training around that, perhaps, that we're trained to deliver and trained to provide for our clients. So our thinking is about the solution. It's about the service we provide, but we can't sell that to a client until we establish a gap between where they are now and where they want to be. They've got a problem. They want the ultimate outcome that they're looking for, but we can't sell them a solution until they're aware of that gap, until they know what it is, and really being able to articulate the problem in a way that means they want it solved. So when I ask my clients, what is the problem that you have the solution for? It challenges their thinking to come back to the basics of where's the client? How do you actually think about it from the client's perspective instead of your perspective as a consultant? Yes. And it's that mindset shift of really putting yourself in the client's shoes and seeing it from their perspective that makes a difference. And when you can really define the problem that you have a solution for, that's where all of your marketing starts from. That's the foundation of all of your marketing, rather than just talking about your services. which often have no relevance to the client because they don't recognize that they even have a problem sometimes, but they don't make that linkage between your service and the problem they have.
Yes, that's a great starting point, Greg. It's often about changing. The first step is really changing that thinking approach to be focused around the problem. And quite often, I find that also starts with identifying that premium customer.
Yes.
Quite often, we serve 5 different industries or 5 different types of customers. I had one company or one client last week that said, "Oh, we have 12. We have 12 different customer types or 12 different personas." I went, "Wow, that's a lot of people in the room." But if you were to maybe narrow that down and say, "Well, who's the best to work with? Who do I like working with? Who can pay for our services? Who do we see as a long-term relationship?" And just starting there, because I can guarantee you at each level or each type of, even by industry, the problems are very different. And I'll give you an example. I'm working this week with a client who is in that they do business strategy, business growth, all the way through to exit. And we were focusing on one particular sort of the property construction space, for example. And as we realized, we did this exercise where we sort of went through who are the premium opportunities, and there could have been 3 or 4, but we're settling down this one particular route. And it took at least one session of deep dive to really understand. So we think that maybe the first 4 problems are the key ones, but when you start to understand what is the impact? So here's one problem, lack of something, right? There's obviously a lack of something that they need to achieve. Maybe it's people, maybe it's growth, whatever it is. But then it's actually kind of understanding, well, from there, why is that a problem? And what happened if this wasn't solved? And why is this being a problem? Like, what have they done to remedy it? And why, is it a lack of resources to tackle this problem, or maybe a lack of know-how? And what you're really sort of doing is, with each particular problem, you're going deep with the process and the thinking around, well, yes, so what? Like, it's not going to matter to me as the person trying to understand what the problem is. It's really around, from our client's perspective, in their shoes, why is it such a problem? Because when you start speaking about the impact and the real reason around why that problem is a difficult, why it is a challenge for them, then you can start to sort of work out and then test that out in the market and see what comes back. So I think the first point there is around, really understanding about the problem. I mean, in your experience, Greg, too, getting that information, because it's very easy to hypothesize. I know that, for example, using customer research directly is something that's really beneficial. How else would you suggest that we frame and go deeper with the problem?
Well, I think a lot of what happens, and I was having this conversation about 90 minutes ago with another consulting firm, or owner of a consulting firm, and it's around the way that a potential client might present their problem to you. And often the presentation is about a symptom where the problem is actually a deeper root cause. So I think this understanding of what are the real problems. So if we respond to that symptomatic problem that a client presents with, and we say, yes, we can solve that, often we've just spent the client's money, put a Band-Aid solution on there, and a few months later they come back and say, this problem's still here, it's not gone.
Yes.
So having that knowledge, I think the intimate knowledge of the clients that you work with, and again, being more specialized in that area rather than having a whole range of different clients with lots of different problems, when you can be more focused around a specific type of client that has specific types of problems, you have more intimacy and understanding of the situation that they're in. So you can identify when they say, this is my problem, you've got a fair intuitive feeling that, well, what they're saying is probably not the real problem, but I've got a pretty good idea what the root cause of that problem is. So really, the understanding of what's the problem that you solve or that you have the solution for really applies here as well, because you're not responding to that initial symptomatic presentation of what they want fixed. You're able to dig deeper and go beyond that surface level to identify the real problem that needs to be solved. And then that opens up usually a much more effective solution, but also a better.
Yes, absolutely agree. What we're saying there is there's 3 types of problems that people can have, and we're tackling the first layer, which is really the known problems, which is the things that they know about. So, for example, in my case, it's lack of leads as one example for a client that comes to me. Oh, we don't have enough leads. There's no pipeline. But then the second layer is known problems that they don't want to share. They're not comfortable in sharing. And that might be, we're not getting many leads, but it's a feast or famine situation. Some months we have great cash flow and other months it drops dramatically. So those are the problems that we can still talk about because they know that they're not comfortable in sharing in a public forum. The third element is the unknown problems. Those are the things that, as you mentioned before, Greg, it's the symptoms, but not the cause. So, for example, I speak a lot about the digital economy and how that's changed the landscape for buying and sales in consulting environments. Now, someone might not actually have known about the fact that by 2025, Gartner's predicting that 80% of sales are going to be through digital channels, which means that if they're doing things through face-to-face and expecting people just to turn up and have sales meetings like they used to, they're going to be disappointed and it's going to be a real struggle. So that's the kind of example of an unknown problem. So what we're saying here is if you're able to understand almost those 3 elements, then in the dialogue and in your marketing messages, you can start to just produce the fact that you do know exactly what they're going through. And those are the things that are going to be able to then shift their thinking and say, you know what, I thought I just wasn't running enough events, but really I've neglected my website for the past 3 years, or I don't touch LinkedIn. LinkedIn I use it to connect with old colleagues. So flipping your thinking and then suddenly going, oh, you know what, maybe I do need to consider and embrace, for example, digital, or what that means, or how do I build trust and build relationships with people online. So would you think that's a sort of fair summation on going deeper with those problems, Greg?
Oh, absolutely, Andy. I think you've really highlighted the change in the marketplace, very, very well and effectively there. In fact, I was listening to a podcast yesterday where they were talking about motor vehicle companies selling online. Now Tesla already does this, but they were talking about another major motor vehicle company changing their, it might have been Ford, I can't remember exactly, but changing their distribution model to online selling. And because if they can do that effectively online, provide the information, then clients who are already resistant to the used car salesman type interaction that it's about learning a new sales marketing model that is what the clients are really looking for. So again, here comes back to the level of knowledge and intimacy we have about the clients and their problems, which in this case doesn't just revolve around the actual problem that they're presenting with, but the problem they have in articulating that, in getting a consultant to understand, to getting into that sales process. We often don't think about that as problems that need to be solved as well, but having our own sales process that really helps the client to buy, rather than that creating a barrier in that process as well, which it often does.
I love that car analogy. That's blown my mind a bit, Greg. You know, that's such a traditional industry where you have to go down to the car yard and you've got to speak to Mr. Salesperson and they do their pitch and they get you to test drive it. Like that's just, I love that. And I think applying that to a consulting environment, I mean, I saw the other day, I think on LinkedIn that so interior design, like someone was showing an interactive interior design experience where they just, a couple of clicks and they all of a sudden, this is what it looks like when you do that. I think it's really interesting to see how this is all changing, and ultimately being able to sort of use that to our advantage as we as we continue to become better and better in our roles. So that's fascinating.
Now I think using online methodologies, again relying on our sales process, a sales meeting as the interaction that precedes the sale and the engagement with a client. What leads up to that, and again thinking about clients' problems and how do we solve their problems. The education that we provide people before we get into that sales meeting. Now, rather than doing all the heavy lifting at that point, if we've pre-sold the clients through our education, whether that's an ebook or a webinar or video training or whatever that might be, allow those tools to do the heavy lifting. So the client's coming to us saying, well, you've nailed my problem. You've shown me that you understand me. You've shown me the best solution that I can see from everyone else I've talked to. Your solution seems to be the best match for the problem that I have. You obviously understand me. How can we start working together to get you solved? Get my problem solved. And it's not a sales process anymore. It's almost like an order taking process where clients come with you. Well, okay, here's what I need. You've shown me what you can do for me. That's what I want. How do we get started? So,
I've seen the car. I've seen how you drive. I've seen what the interior looks like. Let's jump in. No, I think that's fantastic. And so I think really the takeaway for me today was around thinking a bit deeper about how we go about solving our problems. And doing that from a deeper way, but also understanding that there's different levels to the problems that we want to solve. So fantastic session, Greg. So thank you. As we wrap up, where can we find you if we want some more information about Greg Roworth?
Well, there's plenty of information from me and about me on LinkedIn. So just search for Greg Roworth on LinkedIn, and same on my website at businessflightpath.com.
Fantastic. You can find me at Andy Marmont on LinkedIn or concurve.com.au. This has been the Accepted Authority podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.